On this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791 from the Buck and Honey's remote studios, I welcome Tom Oates, whose 40-year career as a sports writer was a dream job. From covering the Green Bay Packers Super Bowl win to the Wisconsin Badger basketball Final Four runs and the Milwaukee Bucks NBA title, Tom had a front row seat to the golden era of Wisconsin sports. You won't want to miss this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up? Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios on the east side of our great capital city of Madison, Wisconsin. You can follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at tdecora8791. as well as hitting me up on Facebook at Tim Decora. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button or like button wherever you listen to the show. Leave me a comment if you liked what you heard. If there's a topic or you know a guest who would love to tell their story, email me at tdecora@gmail.com. Glad you could join us today. Our mission is to share stories and conversations that make you cry, laugh, and think, stimulating emotions, creating laughter, and inspiring the mind. A new episode will air on Monday and Thursday morning, featuring a wide range of guests. The podcast will touch on many subjects such as grief, loss of a loved one, recovery, professional setback, divorce, success despite challenges, etc. Our guests will share how they learn to survive and thrive. We're going to go with a guest here, as you can see over here on my left, maybe as you're looking at us, be on my right, but Tom Oates. We're going to set this up here. According to the internet, and the internet is...
Internet's never wrong.
Is always right. Correct, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. In 1990, there were about 1,228 daily newspapers in the United States. And the total number of daily and Sunday newspapers was about 2,423. There'll be a quiz at the end. The average circulation of everyday newspapers in 2021 was 24.3 million, down from an astronomical 63.2 million in 1990. So one of the things that was one of my favorites growing up was reading the newspaper, and that's not a thing really for me anymore. So today I welcome Tom Oates, the legendary Tom Oates, to the Buck and Honey's remote studios. Raised in Appleton, Wisconsin, Tom is a proud Appleton Xavier Hawk. After high school, he would take his talents to the University of Wisconsin, Madison. After graduation, Oatesy would start a career in journalism. He worked briefly in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin at the Daily Union before returning to Madison and joining the Wisconsin State Journal as a prep writer. 40 years and many, many, many years later, he would retire in 2020. A sad day for all of us sports guys and gals. He considered himself the luckiest columnist on the face of the earth on the announcement of his retirement. I'm so glad he could join us today. Tom Oates, what is up?
What is up? Nothing, just enjoying retirement. And, I'm largely out of the media business. Mike Lucas and I do a podcast, but
you do?
Other than that, largely out of the media business and, just doing retirement things, playing golf and little this, little that, little travel.
I was going to say, so we're shooting this on the first day of my favorite month, and that should lead to me announcing that it's my birthday on the 21st, listeners, so keep your gifts under $15 this year. But anyway, this is Saturday, and I was rolling by Wanakee 6 Mile Creek the other day, and it was open. There were a ton of guys.
Yeah.
Did you get out swing the sticks?
No,
chase a little white ball around?
No, there were 3 or 4 courses in the Madison area open. I think after on what was it? What day was it really warm?
I think it was
Thursday maybe, or Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, the Bridges, the Oaks. I think I know I heard Wanakee, Mount Horror. I think there were a bunch of courses that just opened up for that one day. Well, it almost hit 60. So
yeah,
I don't know. I would not want to damage my greens by letting people tromp on them. But at this time of year. But hey, if they can make a buck,
more power to them.
As we do this, it's February 1st, and I think February 2nd is going to be another really warm day, and maybe they'll open up then.
Yeah.
Door Creek, too, because,
Door Creek.
I play there on occasion. Kathy and I play all around, and I play in Door Creek, and I get on their mailing lists for some reason, and they sent out that they were open whatever day, and they'd probably be open Sunday again. That's the email I got anyway. So.
I think those rock hard fairways and fairways would really mess with my spray game and my ability to take up the turf when you got to.
And the other thing,
wedge it up there.
The other thing, Timmy, is this. They say trees are 90% air. That's baloney. But when there's no leaves on them, they might be 90% air. So there you go. It's a lot easier to hit through the trees.
Yeah, I completely 90% disagree with that, because every time I try to go over or through the trees, it gets knocked down.
You hear that familiar sound? That
Yes.
familiar clunk?
Clunk. You know that I retired in June of 2024. And when I envisioned retirement, I always thought that I would be at this time in Florida or maybe Arizona, just kicking back and enjoying some sun and recreation. And I thought you would have been the same way, but I see you walking the halls just like I am of the Cole Center. We just can't seem to get that out of our blood. Badger basketball game nights, you and Kathy walk around. Have you done any getaways in your retirement? And if so, where to?
Well, unfortunately, we've been dealing with her parents, who have both passed within the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And Kathy was kind of nominated among her siblings to be a caretaker, and they live in Duluth. So our early retirement years have not had the travel that we want, but our thing is we love the four seasons. I do not want to leave Wisconsin. I love the fact that we have four distinct seasons. It's great here. Having said that, we love to go south and get in the sun, Caribbean Islands, Mexico, Belize. We've taken a lot of trips. Southern U.S., but not a big fan of. Don't really want a place in Florida. Mm-hmm. Don't mind going there once in a while, but don't really want a place. Don't like the heat in Arizona. Don't mind going there once in a while.
Nice places to visit.
Love the weather in Southern California, but the traffic and all that, too many people. Like to go there, but again, so we're content and to travel to places and stay living here. Simply, we love the four seasons, and
I was gonna say,
you don't get that down there.
I love the Four Seasons in like L.A. and I love the Four Seasons in Miami.
Well,
those Four Seasons.
Now, the one place where I think the weather is perfect is Hawaii, and we go to Hawaii too, and the weather is always good. Is that my phone?
That is your phone.
Oh.
Do you have a silence on that?
That's my cousin.
That's your cousin.
I just silenced it.
Oh,
but
you did. You just silenced.
In fact, we're going down to St. Augustine to visit him and his wife and play some golf.
Hey, Rick, you just got silenced by Tom.
It's my cousin, Rick Sturdivant from Milwaukee.
Rick Sturdivant from Milwaukee. Okay. Because I want to get to some of your stories that you're going to share with us today, we're going to get to our sponsor and link here. Our sponsor, Buck and Honey's Restaurants, are a place that people can escape to. For me, it's a great escape from cooking dinner with their great food and drink menu, 5-star customer service, and a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere. People keep coming back with locations in Sun Prairie, Monona, Wanakee, and Mount Horeb. Most communities in the Dane County area can get to a Buck and Honey's within 10 to 15 minutes. Great planning by our friend Tom Anderson. Have you been to Buck and Honey's?
Oh yeah. I know Tommy Anderson. I met him many years ago, and good guy, runs a good place.
All those Dells guys are great guys.
All those Dells guys are great guys. I agree, and can't argue with that.
No.
And anyway, I've been to actually the one in Sun Prairie probably the most.
That's the home office.
The home office, and I like the bar there. I think it's a cool bar.
Yeah.
And,
just the vibrant, like I said, it's always a vibrant atmosphere. And
Yeah.
wherever Tommy happens to be, and it's usually probably in Sun Prairie, you can always find him walking around and shaking hands, kissing babies, running for Senate.
All you Dells guys are good at that.
Shaking hands, kissing babies.
Am I right?
Running for Senate. Gosh darn it all.
When's your campaign start?
When's my campaign start? It's right here. We're in it right now. Yeah, Tommy, he just does a great job with, and he hopped on because of his passion for mental health, which we'll get into in the other promo. But on the podcast, our guests will follow the format for sharing their story like this. What was it like, and what happened will be segment 1, and what is it like now will be segment 2. But we're gonna shift a little bit from that, because the reason I have Tom come on is I want to talk about his days with the newspaper and my love of the newspaper, and in particular the sports page. And I got to admit, I don't read the sports page at all anymore because we don't get the paper. But we're going to talk a little bit about what was it like before, and then kind of what happened with more importantly with his job, because I sometimes can't believe that I know Tom Oates, and now I got him in the studios here. But I certainly, you were kind of one of my little idols, you and Robbie Hernandez.
Robber,
yeah. So tell us about your family growing up in Appleton. Big family?
No, 5 kids, typical Irish post-war family, I guess. Nothing too great, but I do remember we always got the Appleton Post-Crescent, which at the time was an afternoon paper. And for some reason,
really?
I don't know why, my parents got the Milwaukee Sentinel as a morning paper. So I grew up reading both of those newspapers, and, got very interested in it, ended up getting into it in college. But I went to Appleton Xavier, which at the time had an unbelievable sports tradition. It was a brand new school, started in about 59, 60, I think was the first year, and that wasn't a 4-year school. Then they started with a freshman and a sophomore class, and built it up, and they were an instant sports power in the Fox River Valley. You may remember Rocky Blyer.
Oh, yeah.
Was a running back at Xavier,
right.
and Xavier was 27-0 in Rocky's years, and he averaged like 12 yards a carry over 3 years, and went to Notre Dame, won all the Super Bowls with the Steelers. Terrific guy.
Proud Hawk. Proud Hawk.
Great guy. And I mean, I know the family. I went to school with his brother and one of his sisters and his brother. And Kip Whitlinger and Rocky won a state basketball championship in like 63, which really was a huge thing. It was like Xavier's second year as a 4-year school.
Wow.
And they won the state basketball championship. Kip Whitlinger went to Ohio State and got a scholarship to Ohio State right after the Jerry Lucas, John Havlicek season.
Bobby Knight
season or era. He went to Ohio State on a scholarship, and and in fact, he was the all-time leading scorer, I think, in Appleton history.
Rocky Blyer?
No, Kip Whitlinger.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, Xavier had this great athletic tradition. Just grew up in a real competitive school. Xavier, when it opened in the 60s, was a big school, a big Catholic school, like 1,100, 1,200 kids. In fact, my graduating class was the largest ever in the school. And but really competitive, athletically competitive and academically competitive. And it was really kind of shaped me and gave me a competitiveness and a knowledge of how to do things and what constitutes doing things the right way.
Mm-hmm. Probably set you up for success, because you would take your talents then to the University of Wisconsin. And I'm going to ask the question. I know you're a proud Badger alum, but why Wisconsin? Did you have any other suitors for your academic?
I think you're throwing that word suitors around a little loosely. I considered Marquette, Notre Dame, and Purdue besides Wisconsin. That's who I considered.
Those are some pretty good suitors.
And I believe I would have been a suitor, but anyway, I just wanted to go to Wisconsin. It was a rough stretch for Wisconsin. It was right in the middle of the anti-war protests that occasionally erupted into riots, which started on campus at Madison like 67 or 8 when I was still in high school.
They had that explosion on campus.
And the explosion when Sterling Hall got bombed occurred, I think it was the last week of August in 1970, and my first class at Wisconsin was in September 21 of 1970. So it was less than a month later that I started classes as a freshman at Wisconsin. So the campus was still in a large uproar, and there were still, through my first several years of college until the Vietnam War ended, there were still frequent protests that occasionally erupted into violence.
Well, I'm glad you stuck it out as a Badger, because if you didn't, and you didn't decide that, well, maybe Marquette looks a little bit nicer now, or Purdue, or some of the other places, but I'm glad you stuck it out.
I wanted a bigger school, to be quite honest. I think you can take care of yourself at a large school like Wisconsin, and I think many graduates every year prove that.
Yeah, heck of an alumni base as well. Your first job after you graduated was with the Daily Union in Fort Atkinson, and you're going to add a couple other words to the Daily Union. Circulation size about 200,000-300,000.
Yeah. No, it was a small paper. When I was in school, I wrote for the Badger Herald, and then I also worked part-time at the State Journal. That's when I was answering phones and taking high school box scores and all that kind of business.
Until past midnight.
Yeah, and then including sometimes when we had to actually call coaches in the bars to get box scores. the old guy, Joe Domerhausen, that ran the high school sports at the time, he knew every bar in every city in southwestern Wisconsin, so he could find them in the bars. But so anyway, actually, Joe kind of got me the job in Fort Atkinson, or recommended me for the job in Fort Atkinson, because he had so many good connections with all these little papers. And so I went down there and had a great time. But it was a small paper, circulation 10,000 or some, 8,000. I can't remember what it was. It just served Jefferson County. It's the Daily Jefferson County Union. It was in Fort Atkinson, served Fort Atkinson, Jefferson, Lake Mills, Cambridge, Whitewater a little bit, the stuff like that. So
got to cut your teeth down there.
It was great preparation because you did everything. You took pictures, you edited, you wrote stories, you edited stories, you did lay out the section, you did all that kind of stuff. And I also, when I first went down there, I did sports, but I was also a news writer and covered, trials and court cases and city councils and county boards and blah, blah, blah. And that was it was informative, let's put it that way. There were some things I liked about it, but it was a lot of long, boring meetings. And if I was going to go sit 2 hours or 3 hours and write a story on something, I decided I'd rather do it at a football game than a county board meeting where they're arguing over which tractor they're going to buy for the county farm. So
you probably learned what you liked in the journalism business and probably what you didn't. And I think everybody needs to go through that in order to find their why and how come. So 1980, you're hired as the prep writer for the Wisconsin State Journal. Prep football in the fall, basketball and wrestling in the winter, baseball, softball, tennis, track and field in the spring. What did that first year entail at the State Journal, or those first couple years?
Well, it was a lot of getting to know people and getting to know people outside of the area that I had covered and lived in for the last few years. But there was some overlap when you cover, Fort Atkinson High School at that time was in the Badger Conference. Jefferson was in the Rock Valley Conference, and I knew a lot of the coaches and a lot of the sports from 2 or 3 different conferences. The old Eastern Suburban with Cambridge and Johnson Creek too. Mm-hmm. And so, that really gave me a head start. I did not know north of Madison, like up in the Dells area where you were from, or down in the southwest part of the state. I didn't know those very well, but it's all, they were no different. They're just different names and different schools and different players. But so it was a pretty easy transition. Let's put it that way. I just had a lot more things to keep track of.
Yeah, I think what ended up, in hindsight, looking back on it, by you covering all of those people and introducing yourself and your work to them and putting their names in the paper, you started to gain a little bit of a legion of Tom Oates guys like myself who enjoyed reading your stuff and seeing you at games, and I think that helped get your listenership or your circulation, people picking up your stuff. So those first couple of years that you were covering sports for the State Journal, when you look back on it, and you already dropped some names in there, what were some of your favorite memories or best athletes that you had a chance to cover?
Well, the first few years, I remember in 81, which was the year that two teams from the same conference, Cuba City and Iowa Grant, won state championships. And Jerry Pettigrew was, at Cuba City. He's been there since the beginning of time. And and they won. They had a big team. They had a really good team, a bunch of 6'4", 5 guys that.
And that was big. That was like 6'7", 6'8" now.
Yeah, they had a big. They had guards that were 6'4", and they were good. And then Iowa Grant had a nice team. Steve Randall coached them, and he later coached Greg Gard in high school, and then he went to Oshkosh and won a championship at Oshkosh West before he sadly passed away unexpectedly. And then his son Lance succeeded him at Oshkosh West and won a state championship. And then Lance is now on Greg Gard's staff at Wisconsin. So again, the interconnectedness of the sports world has amazed me for as long as I've been in it.
Your responsibilities start to increase. You're getting bigger and better stories to cover. I think you said you just kind of shrunk it down to a couple things. We're going to get to that in segment 2, along with some of your favorite stories and events. And the reason I wanted you to bring you on is I'm going to get lost for 90 minutes to 2 hours listening to you tell these stories. And if I had any kind of anxiety, depression, or thinking about something stressful, you're going to take me away from that. And that's why I've got you on, because I love talking sports with you and the stories and the backstories that you tell. And some of our listeners today are going to get a chance to hear that. But before we go, we're going to do with our sponsor one more time. Buck and Honey's has been with the Survive and Thrive 87-91 crew since the beginning, with 4 locations in the Madison area. One is always near. People ask why Buck and Honey's owner Tom Anderson places a high priority on the mental health of his employees. He has a mental health professional available for them should they need support. I don't know how many businesses go above and beyond their employee assistance programs, but Buck and Honey's does. In 1980, you are hired as a prep writer for the Wisconsin State Journal and would embark on a 40-year career that would allow you to have a front seat and a chance to witness up close the golden era of Wisconsin sports. I borrowed that from an article that featured you. So please stay tuned. Don't change that channel. You're not gonna want to miss segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 87-91. We will be right back.
If you, a loved one, or someone you know is experiencing a physical, mental, or emotional crisis, there is help and resources out there. Contact NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness Helpline, at 1-800-950-6264. This is a free service providing information, resource referrals, and support to people living with a mental illness, their family, providers, and the public. United Way 211 is available 24/7, 365, and offers free confidential assistance. They connect people with the local programs and services that can help. Dial 211. Emergency crisis services, dial 911. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, dial 988. To connect via web, chat visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Along with those numbers, there is help. You just need to say 3 words. I need help. Now, back to the show.
We are back. Welcome back to segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Tim DeCora. The podcast is where I feature guests who share their story in hopes of helping others who may be struggling with what life throws at them. You're here today. Tom Oates is here today to share some stories about the golden era of sports in Wisconsin. You are the coping skill today. I have a lot of coping skills now that I didn't have before, but you are the coping skill because of the stories you were just sharing, and I just had to cut you off because we weren't on air, So you're the coping skill today because you're going to entertain us by taking us back in time to some of the primetime era golden moments. And you're going to distract myself and the listeners for an hour. So those of you that are sports people, you're going to love this episode. Your job as a sports writer in Madison was your dream job. Why? Why was it your dream job?
Well, I don't know if it was my dream job. It became my dream job, I guess.
Maybe that's there. You go.
It wasn't something I'd planned or anything. I got into it while I was in school. I didn't really know where I was headed when I was at UW, and a friend of mine wrote for the Badger Herald, the guy I went to high school with, and Billy Hurley, and he suggested I come write for I was taking a lot of journalism. I took some journalism and comm arts and English classes and stuff. And he said, come write for the Badger Herald. And I just kind of got into it almost through the back door and really liked it. And then got a job at the State Journal, and it all went from there. So,
your time as sports writer, beginning of your career, lined up with my intense interest for sports. I was in high school in the 80s. And loved the sports page. I mean, when I finally got my driver's license, I would go drive into town, stop at the Dell's Grill, and throw my quarter in the little machine and then pop it open. And I'm afraid to admit this, but I took 2 papers once in a while because they were there.
You're the guy that did that.
I'm the guy.
All these years we've been looking for them.
Devouring the high school prep box scores.
Yeah, those Saturday morning papers were must-see newspapers, weren't they?
Saturday mornings. Wednesday mornings, Wednesday mornings of the Tuesday night games, reading about the Badgers, the Bucks, Brewers, and at the time, the lowly Green Bay Packers. But in the 80s, you had a lot of sports to cover. My kids grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, and it's hard for maybe some of the listeners to be able to appreciate this, but my kids have experienced nothing but success and championships in that golden era. So with that being said of that golden era, we talked off air about some of the things you missed because you were covering other different sports, but we're gonna talk about some of the downtimes for some sports that you covered, and you talked about being locked up with a bunch of other sports writers in a hotel watching the first Rose Bowl. You weren't there. Tell us a little bit about that.
A bunch of us sports writers watched the Badger Rose Bowl. First Rose Bowl, which was phenomenal, with 75,000 Badger fans there or whatever there were. It was just such an awakening of sports, I think, in the whole state. Not just for UW football, but I think in the whole state that was just an awakening of sports that Wisconsin could compete with the big boys, so to speak. And a bunch of us sports writers were in Detroit and to cover a Packer game, and we couldn't get into the hotel. They didn't have the rooms ready, so Tom Silverstein from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel got a room, and a bunch of us piled in there. We were standing and sitting all over and laying on beds and on the floor, and that's how we watched the Badgers win the Rose Bowl in January 1, 1994.
And you were probably watching the game on a mammoth 28-inch color TV.
Yeah, I could have used those the TVs they have in hotel rooms now. Certainly at that point, but it wasn't a black and white with rabbit ears. If that's what you're insinuating.
No, that's what I grew up with. Was the black and white 19-inch with the rabbit ears? Absolutely.
Watched the Ron Dean game in an airport. I think it was in Atlanta. But I twisted the guy's arm to get the game on TV and watched it. It was, I think it was one of the coolest Badger football games ever. I can't imagine that there were many more fun days at Camp Randall Stadium than that football game when Ron Dane broke the national rushing record.
And no better team to do it against than the
Iowa Hawkeyes, which, you're one of your two real, what I would call arch rivals, Iowa and Minnesota. So doing it against them was certainly a lot of fun, I'm sure.
All right. Now, the real reason we have you here today is you're going to kind of take us back into some moments. And we talked a little bit about them off the air, but what were your greatest Wisconsin sports events you ever covered? And I think the first one you started with off air was when the Packers beat the Patriots at the Superdome, and you were there to cover that game. And it starts out, and you said the second play of the game was...
Yeah. I mean, most of the great memories I have are of events where teams from Wisconsin emerged from long droughts, where they oftentimes weren't even competitive. And I'm talking the Packers, Badger football, Badger basketball, the Brewers, eras that were really down, and people didn't think Wisconsin could compete, or the Packers could compete on these national levels. UW men's hockey being about the lone exception through all those years of being a national championship contender on a fairly regular basis. So that Packer game was, so it comes down to the aha moments, and that Packer game against New England in the Superdome, the 1996 season, they won the championship. It was just one long aha moment, but the first one was on the second Packer play of the game. They forced a punt, and on a second play, Favre goes back and finds Andre Rison behind the defense for 50, 60-yard touchdown, and comes running off the field with his helmet held high, which would get him a penalty nowadays. But and you just go, it was just an absolute moment where you thought, oh my God, the Packers can win a Super Bowl. and for so many years, it hadn't even dawned on anybody that the Packers could win a Super Bowl. And, that game went on. It was a terrific game. Every time the Patriots got close, the Packers answered. Long touchdown pass to Antonio Freeman. Patriots get close again. Desmond Howard returns a kickoff for a touchdown. Patriots get close again, and Reggie White has 3 sacks late in the game. It was just a really phenomenal game, a turning point for the franchise. I think a turning point for sports in Wisconsin, along with the 93 UW team that won the Rose Bowl. I think those were probably the 2 biggest turning points for sports in Wisconsin in the 90s.
And I think as you were talking about the Packers game, I can hear Max and Jim in my ears, where those were the days where we would turn off the volume on the TV, and it usually lined up with the play-by-play of Max and Jim Irwin. You grew up in that area of listening to those guys do games all those years. I just love listening to those guys.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, a lot of times I didn't get to listen because I was there. So, but I certainly got to know those guys and listened to them when I needed to or could and did. And it's just, announcers are great. We just lost Bob Uecker, and for most of our lives, we've been listening to these guys, and there are a number of Packer guys over the years. I think we're blessed with great announcers in this state. Now, Matt LePay is the voice of the Badgers, and for eternity of sports, Matt LePay will be the voice of the Badgers, and that's great, and because he does a terrific job. And Jim and Max, and after that, Wayne Larrabee and Larry McCarron, who I covered as a player when Larry was a player for the Packers in the 80s. Really terrific stuff. But that was a real turning point. or I think. And then you want me to go on with a
so
few
we-
more
so-
aha moments?
So let's stay kind of we'll go in chronological order. So we talked about the 90s, and then we talked about that 2000 Badger basketball Final Four, and my really good friend was a part of that team, Charlie Wills.
Yep.
And then we talked about the old WISA state tournament guys, Kowski and Kelly being on that team as well. So go ahead and talk about that little run.
And I had seen Kowski and Kelly a lot in high school, being an old WISA guy, and I'd go over and try and cover Edgewood in the tournament every year.
Oh, yes.
Even when I was, not covering high schools anymore, just because I wanted to go see the WISA tournament. And anyway, I digress. But the 2000 Badger basketball season, I thought, even more so than making the tournament in '94 and a few subsequent years under Dick Bennett. They made the tournament, I think, '97 and '99 maybe. They got in this tournament, and a team without a great player, but a lot of really good players. And they were playing really well. They end up with a big comeback to get into the tournament against Indiana in the last game of the season. Duaney got hot and really saved their butts. And, we didn't think much of it. They won the first game. I think it was Fresno State. Then they beat number one seed Arizona. And they played really well in that game. John Bryant just was on fire. And I think Maurice Linton maybe hit the go-ahead shot right toward the end. But that was fine. And it was really a big game, and it was a big win. But it wasn't like, oh, my God, Wisconsin can go to the Final Four. Because, next up was the regional, where they beat LSU and beat Purdue to go to the Final Four. But LSU had a really good team, couple of 6'10" future NBA players.
Guys that could run like
guys that could run and jump and block shots and score, and Wisconsin got them in the pit in Albuquerque in the first game of the regional and just took them apart. I mean, systematically, offense and defense took LSU apart. Kowski's blocking shots, Kelly's getting steals, Bryant and I don't even know who else got hot that day. Maybe Vershaw. Maybe Roy Boone. I can't remember. I mean, like I said, there was just every game it was a different guy. Bryant had the hot tournament.
He did.
But every game it was a different guy coming through in a different way, because they had Charlie Wills. They had a lot of good, solid basketball players. And
I think John Bryant might have been a little way ahead of his time, because he came from Winona State in sort of a transfer portal kind of thing.
And he was a 3-point shooter. And he got hot in that first game of the tournament and stayed hot. And it was really a terrific run. But I thought the aha moment was the LSU game, when they took apart a really good team. They beat Purdue in the regional final to go to the NCAA tournament, and they played well, and it was a good game. And Purdue had a typical Purdue team, not one of Katie's best teams, but a typical Purdue team. And they did that, but that LSU game really opened people's eyes, I think, around the country and everywhere.
And then if you're going to lose to a team during that run, you might as well lose to the champion.
They end up losing to the number one ranked and eventual national champion Michigan State in Indianapolis at the Final Four in the semifinal, and they were 0-4 against Michigan State that year, and their record otherwise was pretty darn good, but they just couldn't beat. That was an unbelievably good Michigan State team. Mateen Cleaves and
they had a really good forward.
And Richardson was young on that team, coming off the bench, and they just had a terrific team
and a great coach.
And another aha moment was the 2015.
Badger
basketball getting to the Final Four.
I can hear Matt LePay, and we talked about Matt off air a little bit, and I can hear him say this: the Badgers are going to Monday, or they advanced to Monday. And I don't remember exactly what the words are, but
that Kentucky, they beat a 38-0 Kentucky team in the first round, and they'd lost to Kentucky on a last-second shot the year before.
They did.
In the same position. And I always go back to the year before. I was flying down to Dallas, and John Beilein was sitting in the seat behind me. He was coaching Michigan. And I was talking to him as we walked down to get bags, and he goes, Wisconsin has a chance to win this tournament. This was 2014. I said, really? He goes, yeah. He said, nobody thinks they do, but they might have the best team here. And, everybody was hyping up Kentucky, and on the other side was UConn and Florida. And everybody's hyping up Kentucky even that year too. And, I mean, if they win that game, I think they would have beat UConn in the final. But I'll never forget, John Beilein was right. I don't think Wisconsin thought they could or really knew they could compete at that level until they got into that Kentucky game, and they had every chance to beat Kentucky. And Kentucky made a great play at the end. I mean, guy makes a long shot, a long three that hits the rim in a couple places, and Josh Gosser had great defense on him, and one of the Harrisons. And
I think I heard Josh utter somewhere in an interview, I didn't think he was going to shoot it from there because he was way off.
It was a really
out.
long three, and they shoot long threes more now than they used to, but back then they didn't. But anyway, they get into the next year, they get in there and they beat Kentucky, and they beat Kentucky. They didn't beat them by 1 or 2 points. They beat them, I think, 7. Mm-hmm. And Kentucky was 38-0. Karl Anthony Towns, Devin Booker, all future, 5 or 6 future
the Twins were still on
future
the team.
NBA players, and
the great John Calipari.
Willie Cauley-Stein, and I mean they just had a bunch of first round draft picks, and
McDonald's All-Americans.
Wisconsin played a great game, and I just remember Sam Decker down the stretch of that game was the best player on the floor. He was absolutely took over that and I rolled back, Tom Crean happened to be sitting right behind me, and we were talking, and he said, did you see that play Decker made? Did you see that play Decker made? And it was 2 or 3 plays that he just made that really turned that game in the last few minutes. And they beat, I've had Kentucky fans jump me on Twitter over the years and other social media platforms, and I only go #38-1. That's my response to them.
I got your back, Tom. If we need to go,
thanks.
I got your back. I think
because on a Big Blue Nation's pretty tough, but 38-1 shuts them up.
Yeah,
and then that was the aha moment. Was that because if you look at that run, the last 4 games they beat Arizona, North Carolina, Arizona, Kentucky, and then they had Duke beat halfway through the second half. If that would have been. If they had completed the Duke game and not had it stolen from them by the refs.
That was 5 against 8.
If they had done that, if they had completed that, it would have been, in my mind, one of the greatest runs in the history of the tournament. I had absolutely no question
bar none.
They would have beaten 4 highly ranked blue blood programs dripping with NBA talent, every one of them. And, it would just, it was a phenomenal run anyway. Let's just say that. It was an unbelievable run. And, but as aha moments go, that one was, Bo Ryan had put together a team, with Kaminsky and Decker and all the rest who could play with and compete with absolutely anybody in the country. And, they beat Kentucky, the Kentucky team that everybody had conceded the championship to. So it was really, that was a good one.
I think it was Zach Showalter that coined this. It wasn't really coined a phrase, but I took note of it, that you had Kentucky with all of these McDonald's All-Americans, and you had Wisconsin with all of these WBCA All-Stars, Bronson Koenig, Sam Decker, Zach Showalter, Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Association All-Stars. We had no McDonald's All-Americans on our team, and they had about 5 or 6, and
Yeah, but
you're right.
Wisconsin had some good play. I mean, Nigel Hayes was a good player, and he's still playing in Europe and doing really well. Bronson Koenig was a really good player. Douye Dukan, by the time he was a 4th or 5th year player, was a pretty good player, and he even got a cup of coffee in the NBA. Josh Gasser, they had coaches for years calling them. Where do you find a guy like Josh Gasser? I mean, coaches from around the country. How do you evaluate and find a guy like Josh Gasser? Because everybody wanted a guy like Josh Gasser on their team.
And let's remind the listeners too that we also had the National Player of the Year on our team, Frank Kaminsky.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of the things Frank did to I would always watch fellow reporters who weren't used to, especially during the tournament when there's all these national reporters there. Covering the tournament games, they would watch Frank and his footwork around the basket and his moves and they were just, I would see them go, oh my God, wow, we had no idea, and all of a sudden it started in Frank's junior year, the back half of his junior year, and especially in the tournament. I can remember him destroying Baylor at one point, and Frank could pass, and he had all these great moves, but people just marveled at his footwork, and he was the National Player of the Year, and in my opinion, a very deserving National Player of the Year.
He was, yes. Let's move forward to the 2020s and give me your thoughts on when our Milwaukee Bucks win the NBA title. I've been a Bucks fan. I was born in '69, and I wasn't quite, into stuff in '71 when we won that first NBA title, but have always been a Bucks fan since about the mid '70s. My great uncle would ask me, "Hey, guess how many points Sydney had last night?" Or "Did you see Marcus?" And so I was a Bucks guy all along, and I get a little choked up when I talk about the year that they won the NBA title. I didn't think I would ever see an NBA title, and we won.
Well, the way I look at it is in '71 when they won it, which I did see, they had the best player in the game, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it wasn't even close. He was just an absolutely dominant player. Wilt was a little bit on the downside. Jerry West and Oscar Robertson, who, was the catalyst when they traded for Oscar Robertson and paired him with Kareem. That was the catalyst for that championship team. But they were a little on the downside, and Kareem was just an absolutely, his first 7, 8, 9 years in the league, he was just the most dominant player anyone had ever seen. And that's when they won that title. They almost won another one in '74. And then I fast forward to the Bucks championship, and they had who at the time was the best player in the game. I don't think there's any question. I don't think their supporting cast had an Oscar Robertson, but Chris Middleton and
Drew Holiday
were terrific players.
The jury's still out on Drew because he won an Olympic gold.
I love Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday, I don't know. There's lots of ways to categorize players. I categorize him in 2 ways. Is he a winning player or is he not a winning player? And Drew Holiday was a winning player. Whatever was needed, passing, defense, steal, rebound, whatever was needed, Drew Holiday did it. And he acquiesced to the stars of the team, and he's just a winning basketball player. And I think they haven't been the same team since the day they traded him. And but no, I loved the fact that Milwaukee could do it, and I think the reason Milwaukee could do it was because Giannis is such a unique individual. He's a delightful
human being,
and kind of this naivete that he's a poor kid from Athens, Greece, and he didn't grow up with all the entitlements that you see with a lot of the American-born players these days. where they're pampered from the time they're in fifth grade on. And none of that. He was enjoying the journey so much, and just it kind of reminded me a little bit of the 2015 Badgers, who was the most fun team I've ever covered in my life. Those kids milked every ounce of enjoyment out of their runs because they were just a bunch of guys having fun. And the Bucks kind of reminded me of that, especially Giannis, that he was just enjoying that ride so much. And oh, by the way, he was, the best player on the planet. And but him committing to stay in Milwaukee was just huge. And I have to give my annual shout out to John Hammond.
Yes.
John Hammond is a former Bucks general manager, and he's the guy who drafted Giannis. Now, he had help. He had from scouts over, and John now works for the Orlando Magic, and he's also the guy that traded for Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton was a throw-in on the Brandon Knight, Brandon Jennings deal with the Detroit Pistons. And I'm getting into the weeds here, but I'll end this very quickly. They needed another player to throw in to even out the the NBA salary cap thing, and they threw in Chris Middleton, who at that time had played 1 year in Detroit. And I once asked John Hammond, who was a very honest, straight shooting guy. I said, "Did you have any idea? Did you signal out Chris Middleton as a guy you wanted?" He said, "No, he was just the throw-in." He said that one took us by surprise how good Chris Middleton was, and certainly how good he became. Yeah. But so I give my annual shout out to this whole Bucks run of the last 10 or so years. The key players within that were acquired. The two most, I don't say most important, but two of the three or four most important players were acquired by John Hammond.
This leads into your 5 suggestions. Really, I don't know how this could set up any better. Getting lucky. The Bucks got lucky, and we're going to switch to now your 5 things about how things happen for you and how the success you had behind the keyboard and the pencil and the pen. You got lucky with, but then the preparation that you did leading up to your time in Madison at the Daily Union prepared you for all that success that came when you got lucky with all of the golden era of Wisconsin sports.
Well, I always say this. You have to get lucky. I got lucky when a job opened at the State Journal right about the time I was, I loved my time in Jefferson County, but I was about done there. And a job opened up, and I got it. So that's the luck part. But it's way more than luck. You have to be prepared to succeed when your break comes. You have to be prepared to take advantage of it. And that's the part that's not luck. Are you good enough? Are you smart enough? Are you this? Are you that? Are you prepared enough? Do you have enough experience? And the experience I had gained really helped me. And when I came back to Madison, I was much more prepared to succeed at the job I was hired for. And then I advanced from there to, bigger and better things as I went all along. Not to denigrate prep sports, because I love prep sports, but so again, luck is a big part of it, but you also have to be prepared to capitalize on your luck.
Mm-hmm. And then I think the third thing I wrote down is, and you've alluded to this already with the people that you've talked to and you've gotten to know, getting to know people, and then you being approachable. I knew you and who you were at the paper, and then once I moved to Madison, I started seeing you around a little more, and maybe I was apprehensive. I'm thinking to myself, hey, that's Tom Oates. He's a sports writer that I read about all the time, and now I don't know where it was that you and I started to rekindle get this friendship going. And you are one of the most approachable guys that that has the spotlight that you've been shining on people. You haven't shined it on yourself, but you have just opened yourself up to all of these people, and you're just approachable.
Well, a big thing of doing the job that I did and do was you have to have contacts. You have to make connections with people. You know, a lot of times it's guys I covered when I was the beat guy with Badger basketball team in the 80s. A lot of those guys are still friends of mine, you know, that I covered. And again, I covered, you know, high school kids, college, whatever, and coaches. Coaches come and go, and it's, you know, there's a connection. I call when something happens. I have coaches I call even today that are still coaching in college football, college basketball, high school sports, or whatever. I have coaches now that I still call. So yeah, making connections is just an absolutely huge thing.
And that allowed you to have an impressive 40-year career, and it's been one that I've been a part of as a young athlete of myself, and then growing up into coaching, and then ultimately retiring a couple of years after you retired. To be able to sit from afar and then up close today, hearing all of these stories has brought me back in time.
We haven't touched on the greatest thing I covered was Wisconsin Dells winning a state championship in 1987.
1987, hence Survive and Thrive, 87, 91.
Tim DeCora, TJ Van Wee,
Jeff Deal, Brian Sweeney.
Brian Sweeney, yep. I remember all those guys.
All Dells guys.
All Dells guys. Wisconsin Dells won a state title, and great backcourt of
my book,
Tim DeCora and TJ Van Wee.
The book that I'm going to write, that I'm in the process of writing, one of the titles is "How the F Did That Happen?" Well, it like you, we learned from our mistakes, and we got some help, and we opened ourselves up, and we're all approachable and all that good stuff. Well, what an episode. I'm so glad you could join us today. Watching a movie, reading a book, or today, like I did, and what I've done in the past, is listening to someone talk and tell stories can be a great distraction from stress, anxiety, depression on any ordinary day. And today you shared parts of your story and parts of the things that you had an opportunity to cover. And I couldn't really interject because there were times where I wanted to ask a question, but like I've said with many of my guests, you turned me into like a 12-year-old little kid listening to you tell these stories and bringing back some good memories. Tom Oates just shared some amazing stories and his experiences as a 40-year sports writer. He also shared what made his time behind the pen and keyboard a success, calling it his dream job. Here are some of the suggestions he has for 40 years of greatness, and that's getting lucky, and then being prepared when that luck comes, getting to know people and being approachable, and then also when you make mistakes, learn from them, and those are some really keys that you can use, you know, wherever. As we close another great episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, are there any final thoughts, Tom?
No, I just think I know sports isn't the be all and end all, and some people don't think it's all that important.
Wait, what?
Well,
what?
No, let me finish.
Yes.
First of all, sports has been very good to both of us. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
And I like to think we've both helped out a little bit along the way ourselves. But I just think there's so much. There's a lot of pluses in sports, especially in youth sports, but even all the way up of just lessons to be learned and in participation and competitiveness and teamwork, and there's just all these lessons that I remember back that I learned in high school and coming up and just playing sports coming up and covering sports that really apply in your later life. And I've had people text me or call me and sports is just, why do we even have high school sports? It's meaningless. And I'm like, my first response was, you obviously never played it. Because if you participate in high school sports, or really anything extracurricular activity in high school, and I always say that, sports is just one extracurricular activity. There's music and drama and blah, blah, blah. The lessons I've carried lessons that I learned in grade school and high school from sports, and I carry them to this day. And there's so much to be learned, and to me, it's just part of the education process growing up.
Absolutely. Oh, man. On our next episode, we will have another amazing guest in the Buck and Honey's remote studios who will share how they survived and thrived. If you have a story to share, or you know someone who does, please reach out to me at tdecora@gmail.com. Until next time, hang in there with whatever you happen to be going through, and with hard work, dedication, and determination, you can survive and thrive. Until next time, take care.